Senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, joining us, also host of ESPN's NFL Matchup Show. And might this be a matchup that shows up on that said program? We'll find out in a second. But every appearance by one Greg Cosell is brought to you by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. Does it make the cut this week, Greg?
Well, I'm glad to see you guys are rocking the sweatshirts, and yes, it's a full segment game, Brownie. So yeah, it kind of made the cut because it's one of the biggest games on the schedule.
Well, we always go casual Friday, which is why and you always go shirt and tie Friday
For taping.
Well, because we shoot the matchup show every Friday morning, so
I know. So you dress up
I'm
one day.
required to look at least semi-classy, Steve.
We dress down once a week. You dress up once a week. That's all there is.
There you go. There you go.
Give us an idea. What are your thoughts about this? What's the matchup look like to you guys?
Well, I think one thing that we looked hard at in this game was the Bengals on first down, because over the last 3 weeks, Joe Burrow has been ridiculously good throwing the ball on first down. In fact, he's 43 for 52 throwing the ball on first down the last 3 weeks. So that's something I think that needs to be dealt with. Most coaches, most defensive players would tell you that first down is normally the best down to throw on. So I think that's something that the Bills defense has to be extremely aware of, and they have to do something to minimize that. You're not going to take it away, but you need to minimize it.
We'll get into more of the matchup in just a second here, but the Bills have 3 new additions to the roster. Linval Joseph, the defensive tackle, signs as a free agent. He's 35 years old, but he played 8 games for the Eagles last year, and looks like he's still got a little juice left in the tank, and we know the Bills are still trying to shore up their run front after the loss of Daquan Jones for the rest of the season, potentially, with the torn pec. How do you see him coming in and being a help here? What's his skill set?
Well, Brownie, all I can tell you is what he did last year. He came off the couch last year, just as he's coming off the couch this year, and he played really, really well for the Eagles as their basic, nose, one technique, did a really good job in the run game. That's his thing. He's a strong interior presence. He can hold up at the point of attack. He can stalemate blocks. He can still defeat double teams at times. So again, all I have to go on is what he did a year ago. Let's assume he's the same player. Then he's a very, very strong interior run defender.
And what about Rasul Douglas from the Packers?
Yeah, Rasul Douglas is an interesting guy, Steve. He's been in the league quite a while. He's played both outside and in the slot. Obviously, they got him to play outside because he's not going to play in the slot. He's always been a guy that's been a really good kind of keyer and cluer of routes and the ball. They're obviously looking for help at corner. That's clearly, something that they've struggled with this year. They've been playing Bedford and Jackson on the outside. You guys might know more, obviously, being in the building. Is he likely to be one of the starters on the outside?
Not this week.
Probably not this week.
I wouldn't expect it this week, but maybe in due time, yes.
Is he an eyes on the quarterback kind of corner?
Yes. He's in that mold, Steve. You've seen guys in your career, I'm sure. I remember with the Eagles, Asante Samuel was very much like that. I always use the term keyer and cluer. They sort of read the receiver through to the quarterback, and they're very willing to jump routes. So every once in a while, they get beat. If I'm not mistaken, didn't they attack him last year when the Bills played the Packers? Didn't they catch him on a double move?
They did, but he also had an interception in that game.
Yeah, but I remember the double move. Right? It just popped into my head.
Yeah,
because that's the kind of corner that he is. But he can make plays on the ball. He's always been that guy.
Yeah, maybe that game last year is a microcosm of who he is as a player.
I think it is. That's a great point, Brownie. I think you're right.
Moving ahead, though, the Bills last week used their dime package with 3 safeties on the field on 38% of their snaps. It's the most extensive use of it we've seen with Coach McDermott as the play caller. And for the most part, it worked pretty well. Poyer was a demon up close to the line of scrimmage there last week.
Yeah.
Racked up a ton of tackles. We already know he's a very good blitzer. This chiefly is their answer to replacing Milano at the second level in pass coverage. How much do or should we anticipate this being used going forward?
I mean, that's obviously they did that. They played 22 snaps a dime against the Bucks.
Right.
You know, I don't know if they would do that on first down. Look, the one thing, here's what we do know. We do know that the Bengals are a very, very high percentage 11 personnel offense, meaning that they are going to play with 3 wide receivers on the field. I think they play well over 80% of their offensive snaps with 3 wide receivers. Then it gets Brownie to be situational. Do you do that on first down? Are you doing that only on second and long or third down? I guess we won't know the answer to that. My guess is on first down, they will not play dime. But, you know, I think that will be a meaningful part of what they do when you get into those longer yardage situations for sure. It was effective. Poyer is really good in that spot. And then you still have Hyde and Rapp on the back end. So I would expect to see it. It's just a matter of how much and situationally.
Are they doing anything in their passing game differently now that Burrow can go under center and that his calf seems healthy? Obviously, they're doing some under center stuff where they never did when his calf was bothering him.
Right.
And you can throw all their statistics out, right? I mean, they're doing completely different stuff now that Burrow's healthy than they were in the first couple of weeks of the season when they were struggling to get the ball down the field. How have they changed? And what are they doing now that they could not do early in the season?
Well, you know, I think it's mostly a function of Burrow, Steve, because he couldn't move very well.
Right.
And you could see it on tape. You could see that he was very conscious of the fact that he couldn't move well. Now he can move well. You know, Burrow is not a runner per se, but he's very light on his feet. I mean, he has, you know, the term I've heard from some offensive coaches, which I love, is he has outstanding operational movement. You know, he can move within the pocket exceptionally well, and he can get out of the pocket at times too. But you know, this is really an offense that runs through the pass game. I mean, they will run the ball. It's not as if they never run the ball, but it really runs through the pass game in Burrow. You know, as I said, they're high percentage 11 personnel. You know, so that's how they play. They don't play a lot of snaps with 2 tight ends. They get a lot of zone coverage because of their wide receivers. Burrow's one of the quickest processors in this league versus zone. I mean, he reads underneath defenders incredibly quickly and incredibly well, and he gets the ball out. In a normal situation, when they're proactive with the passing game, which is why I mentioned the first down passing, he's tough to sack. The sacks come normally, and their O-line is still not great, but their sacks come normally in the longer yardage situations. When they throw it on first down, they don't really get sacked.
Right.
We know that you know, the Bills turn to RPOs a good deal. So do the Bengals, and I was curious because we saw the Jets very effectively neutralize Philadelphia's RPO game a few weeks ago by crowding the line of scrimmage to take the run away and then back everybody out. I'm wondering how much that has been copycatted across the league, and should we expect something like that from Lou Anarumo?
I guess we don't know, but here's what I will say. I would say that you're likely to see the Bills continue to use a good dose of no huddle tempo, because the one thing about no huddle tempo, as you guys know, is it shrinks the defensive menu. It forces them to show their hand because the ball could be snapped at any time. Put the game in Josh's hands. Let him determine that. Let him see what the front is. Let him see what the coverage is. And therefore, you minimize the ability of the defense to jump around pre-snap and disguise with late rotation. It's hard to do that when you're playing against no huddle tempo. As we probably talked last week, because we spoke after the game, but it's worth mentioning again, is last week, the ball came out of Josh Allen's hands from snap to throw quicker than in any game in his career. And I think a lot of that was indeed a function of the no huddle tempo, because they played a defense in the Bucks a little different than the Bengals, but similar in the sense that the Bucks do a lot of things, as do the Bengals, and it really limits what you can do. So again, I'm not saying there'll be no huddle tempo on every snap, but I would think that's something they would want to continue to really limit what the Bengals can show and the disguise and late rotation element of their defense.
Their inability to show different and more exotic defenses because of the pace of the offense. Is that the reason or one of the contributing factors as to why so many more guys had so many more passes? It wasn't just, Diggs with 15 targets.
Yep.
And you know what I mean? Is that one of the cause and effects?
Yes, because now scheme becomes more a factor, Steve, as opposed to individual players. Obviously you always hear, hey, critical situations, you got to go to your best guy. But, don't forget, we talked about the first down passing for the Bengals. Well, last week, Josh was 16 for 20 for 157 on first down, and a lot of that did come out of no huddle. So then the scheme becomes more of a factor than, hey, we got to feed one guy. And that's why Davis was a bigger factor. So, yes, I mean, I think your point is truly well taken. I think that's the reason, because it becomes more scheme and tactics driven as opposed to individual driven.
And then, knowing that Buffalo was able to utilize other players with great effectiveness in the passing game last week, how much more difficult does that make them to defend across the field for the Bengals? I mean, as you know, it's largely been the Diggs show, through the first 6 or 7 games. Now Kincaid has 13 catches in his last 2 games. Khalil Shakir has a single-game career-high 6 for 92. Even Gabe Davis has a regular season single-game career-high 9 catches last week. How much does that muddy the waters for the Bengals defense?
I mean, theoretically, it does. But I'll tell you one thing I'd look for, Brownie. We've seen Lou Anarumo do this over the last number of years. He did it last week as well. It's part of what he does. It would not surprise me, given the quick nature of the pass game and how many balls were thrown inside the numbers, to see him with the 3-man rush and the 8 in coverage to get that extra guy as an underneath defender. So, maybe on those quick throws, all of a sudden Josh is ready to turn it loose, and boy, there's an extra defender underneath. So I would expect to see 3-man rush, 8 in coverage with an extra guy in underneath coverage to try to take away some of those quick rhythm between the numbers throws.
The Bills play, a ton of zone. They're like 80% zone, and the Bengals are not. They're like 60% zone. Does that mean you think that with a 3-man rush, you can play some man-to-man and you can double team a couple of guys if you're going to go 8-man drop? But you think they'll play more zone because of that with 8 guys across or will they go as much man with a 3-man front? I mean, they're not going to. I hear it. I guess I asked this because if they go a 3-man rush, it's almost has to be zone coverage because Josh will just take off and run.
Right. Well, it becomes situational, Steve, as you know. I mean, they're not going to do it on 90% of the snaps.
Right.
So I think it'll be situational. So it's hard to know exactly when they would do it, but that's part of what Lou Anarumo does. And he's, I remember in the playoffs a few years ago when they first beat the Chiefs in the second half of the game, they made the adjustment and they did a lot of 3-man rush and 8-man in coverage. And what they did is they took one of their pass rushers basically on the side of Kelsey when Kelsey was close to the formation, and they used him to kind of jam Kelsey. So it becomes specific to the opponent, specific to the situation, specific to the personnel, but it's something that they will do. I think that they're a team that plays man that plays zone. They'll play both. Again, it'll be situational. An extra underneath defender for a quarterback can be tough. I remember listening to Peyton Manning on one of the Manning casts, I think it was last year, talk about how troublesome that is for a quarterback because all of a sudden you're ready to turn it loose and there's a guy where you don't expect him. And so, again, it's just something that will be part of their plan. I'm just real curious to see how the Bills decide to come out and play because I believe that they'll still do some no-huddle tempo, a meaningful amount of it.
Yeah. Right. And the Bengals have feasted on takeaways, 2 interceptions in each of their last 3 games, which leads me to my last question for you, Greg. How has the new duo at safety performed on the whole for the Bengals. No Jesse Bates, no Von Bell. It's Dax Hill and Nick Scott now. I know Dax Hill has put a lot of crooked numbers in the defensive column. He's been productive, but how have they worked as a tandem back there thus far, in your opinion?
I think it's been solid. And Hill, just so you guys know, he's their tight end matchup. So when they do play man, he'll be on Kincaid. And Hill has corner traits. When he came out of Michigan, I mean, he's 6 feet, 190. He runs exceptionally well. A lot of people, including myself, thought that he could line up and play corner in the NFL. So he's the tight end matchup. Now, they play mostly Scott with him, but they also get the rookie Jordan Battle from Alabama in the game at times. When they play dime, they have 2 forms of dime. They will at times play 4-corner dime, okay? Where actually Hilton, very often, Mike Hilton, who we all think of as a slot defender, he'll become a deep safety when they play 4-corner dime at times. And then, of course, they'll play 3 safety and 3-corner dime, where Battle is the 3rd safety and Hilton remains in the slot. But they are very multiple with their deployment of personnel and their unpredictability in terms of how they use their personnel. So that's something you have to be aware of. They're going to show you a lot of different things. So what it does is it might make it a little more difficult for Ken Dorsey to feel comfortable with exactly what he's calling, because there's going to be an unpredictability to what Lou Anarumo does.
Greg, great talking to you. Always appreciate it. Thanks for spending some time with us. We'll talk to you next week.
Love you guys. Thanks. Appreciate it.